We have a new update in the ongoing civil case surrounding the tragic death of Shanquella Robinson. One of the individuals implicated in her death has now officially responded in court, but not just with a procedural delay tactic. This time, it's a full-blown legal defense. To understand what this means, let's back up. In October 2022, Shanquella traveled to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, with a group of 6 individuals who she at minimum believed she could trust. Within 24 hours, she was dead. The group returned to the U.S. and told her family it was alcohol poisoning. But then a disturbing video surfaced online showing Shanquella being violently assaulted while she was naked and unresisting. She never made it home. Since then, the case has drawn national and international attention. There's been public outrage, an FBI investigation, and more recently, a civil wrongful death lawsuit filed by Shanquella's family. Many of us, including you and me, have shared the same frustration with how slowly justice seems to be moving. And in response to the civil suit, the U.S. government was initially named as a defendant, but those claims were dismissed. In our last video update, we talked about sovereign immunity and why that dismissal was expected. If you missed that, it's worth watching for the full context. When I last updated you, the woman believed to be the aggressor in the viral video was representing herself in court filings under her new name, Imani Green. She had submitted a motion to dismiss the case on procedural grounds, essentially arguing it lacked legal merit. But now she has secured legal representation and is taking a different approach. Her attorney has filed a response in federal court, claiming that Imani acted in self-defense. According to the filing, Shanquella was belligerent, excessively drinking, and allegedly provoked the altercation. They also allege that Shanquella failed to disclose a medical condition prior to the trip. This marks a shift from a procedural strategy to a substantive defense. One of the individuals implicated in the tragic death of Shanquella Robinson has now publicly stated their side of the story under oath. While this doesn't impact any potential criminal charges, it does show how at least one member of the so-called Cabo Six may try to shape the narrative in court. And this pivot may suggest something even more important, that Imani, and now her legal team, believe the case is likely to move forward in U.S. federal court. You don't file a self-defense claim unless you're preparing to fight the case on its merits. So while this defense may raise eyebrows, its very existence signals that the road to justice is no longer stalled. It's beginning to move. So let's talk about that defense, shall we? Because I've definitely got a few thoughts of my own. The viral video shows Shanquella being brutally attacked while not fighting back. She's unclothed, unarmed, and shows no signs of posing a physical threat. In fact, her body language reads more like shock and confusion than aggression. To us observers, the video was not just disturbing, it was devastating. Shanquella doesn't lift a hand in defense. She doesn't even raise her voice. And when someone off camera says, "Quella, you not gonna fight back?" her soft reply of, "No," is heartbreaking. Legal experts say that self-defense hinges on the presence of an immediate threat. But how can someone claim fear for their safety while pummeling a person who is naked, not resisting, and verbally expressing a refusal to fight? If anything, the video presents the opposite of a mutual altercation. It's a one-sided beating. And that visual reality stands in stark contrast to the new legal narrative being put forward. There's also the question of location and behavior. From what we've long understood, the altercation happened inside Shanquella's room, and that detail matters. If Imani were truly acting in self-defense, wouldn't the so-called aggressor have sought her out? Instead, the video shows Imani fully dressed, bonnet and all, while Shanquella is completely unclothed, appearing to have just woken up. That stark contrast matters. It's far more plausible that Imani entered Shanquella's personal space, caught her off guard, and escalated the situation, not the other way around. Self-defense often hinges on whether the person had a chance to retreat or de-escalate, but the video tells a very different story. Rather than backing away or trying to remove herself from danger, Imani appears to advance aggressively, landing repeated blows. At no point do we see her attempt to leave the room, call for help, or show any signs of fear. And while Imani's filing describes Shanquella as belligerent and intoxicated, the footage doesn't reflect a person acting out of control. It shows someone startled, vulnerable, and unwilling to fight. If Imani was truly afraid, why go into the room of the person you fear, rather than avoid them? This implies an ambush, not a defensive reaction. Another deeply unsettling aspect is the behavior of the others in the room. No one steps in to help. No one tries to stop the attack. Instead, they record it, like spectators at an event they expected to unfold. Not forgetting that one voice that is heard saying, "Quella, are you going to fight back?" At least fight back. To which Shanquella quietly replies, "No." Now think about that. If Shanquella were the aggressor, wouldn't the concern have been for Imani's safety? Wouldn't we hear someone yelling at Shanquella to stop, not encouraging her to respond? The tone and comments captured in that moment suggest something far more disturbing, perhaps a group that anticipated Shanquella would be dominated, not defended against. And when viewed through that lens, Imani's claim of self-defense begins to fall apart. It doesn't look like someone defending themselves. It looks like someone asserting dominance, while others watched, filmed, and allowed it to happen. The off-camera comment, "Quella, are you going to fight back? At least fight back." That comment alone undermines the idea that this was an act of defense. It doesn't sound like someone witnessing an act of self-defense at all. It frames the moment not as an emergency, but as entertainment. Another point that raises eyebrows is what didn't happen after the assault. If Imani truly believed she was defending herself from an aggressive and intoxicated person, someone she feared, then why didn't she seek help? Why not call the police or request medical assistance, even for her own injuries? Why wasn't there any visible panic displayed in the video or urgency in the aftermath? In most genuine self-defense cases, the victim immediately tries to de-escalate once the threat is neutralized. Someone calls for help. Someone calls for medical attention. Witnesses stay behind to give statements. There's an effort to make sure the truth comes out. But that's not what happened here. Instead, they packed up and left the country. If this were truly self-defense, wouldn't Imani have wanted her side of the story on record? Given that she knew she was being recorded and that the confrontation ended in a fatal outcome, wouldn't Imani have done everything possible to explain her actions to the authorities, rather than return home and help spin a false story to Shanquella's grieving parents? That absence of action, the silence, the exit strategy, raises serious questions. That's consciousness of guilt, in my opinion. Because credible self-defense isn't just about the moment someone swings. It's about what happens in the minutes, hours, and days that follow. On the matter of shifting narratives, when the group returned to the United States, they told Shanquella's family she had died of alcohol poisoning. Not a single person mentioned a fight, not Imani, not anyone else who was in that villa. Imani had a clear opportunity to tell the truth. Reports say she was one of the 6 who visited Shanquella's mother and sister shortly after the trip, returning her belongings, sitting with them, even helping pick out colors for the funeral. And still, not a word about the altercation. That level of deception, especially in person, and so soon after Shanquella's death, makes it difficult to now cast herself as a victim acting in self-defense. If she truly acted in self-defense, why lie to the family? That contradiction doesn't just raise doubts, it weakens her credibility. It suggests the group wasn't just silent. They were actively constructing a cover story. And that cover story conveniently left out the very detail Imani is now using to justify her actions. Changing your story when the stakes change doesn't strengthen your defense. It raises questions about what you're trying to hide. In court, this kind of behavior doesn't just raise moral questions, it raises legal ones too, because it shows intent, coordination, and concealment, and it directly conflicts with the story now being told in court. One of the core elements of a self-defense claim is the presence of an immediate threat, but in this case, there is no known evidence that Shanquella posed any danger to Imani. There's been no mention of injuries sustained by Imani during or after the altercation. No documented wounds, no ER visits, nothing that supports the idea that Imani was harmed in a way that would warrant the level of violence seen on video. And not long after the Cabo Six returned to the U.S., photos began to surface showing Imani and Winter Donovan out socializing with friends. In those images, Imani appeared uninjured. No visible bruises, no swelling, no bandages. This only raises more doubt about whether she truly had anything to defend herself from. And let's entertain a hypothetical. What if Shanquella had been the aggressor the night before, and tensions carried into the next morning? Even if that were true, and to be clear, no evidence has surfaced supporting it, retaliation is not the same as self-defense. Self-defense must be immediate and proportional to an active threat. If someone attacks you, you're allowed to protect yourself in that moment, not hours later when the threat has passed and they're no longer confronting you. So if Imani woke up the next morning still angry and chose to confront Shanquella, who appeared groggy, nude, and vulnerable, it wouldn't qualify as self-defense. It would look more like payback, and the law doesn't protect premeditated revenge, especially not when one person ends up dead and the other walks away unscathed. This isn't just morally disturbing, it has serious legal implications. A claim of self-defense can collapse if it's shown the defendant initiated or escalated the violence after the danger had ended. And in this case, the only person who never walked away was Shanquella. Even if something happened the night before, an argument, a scuffle, or harsh words exchanged, what happened the next morning matters far more in the eyes of the law. From the video, it appears that Imani entered Shanquella's room the next morning, and she wasn't acting in a panic. She was fully dressed, wearing a bonnet, calm in her movements. This was someone who had time to think, to get ready, to make a choice. Contrast that with Shanquella, unclothed, seemingly just waking up, completely unarmed and unprepared. She wasn't an immediate threat. She wasn't any kind of threat. And when you have time to get dressed, time to walk into someone else's space, time to bring others with you, and then time to begin an assault, that's not self-defense. That's escalation. That's premeditated confrontation. If Imani was truly in fear for her safety, she should have avoided Shanquella altogether. She should have left Shanquella's room, notified resort staff, or waited for help. Instead, she walked in, surrounded by others, and launched a brutal attack. In court, all of this matters, not just the violence itself, but the choices that led up to it. This isn't the first time we've seen self-defense claims spark national outrage, especially when the video or audio evidence seems to tell a different story. Take the case of Ahmaud Arbery. The men who killed him initially claimed they acted in self-defense during an attempted citizen's arrest. But the video told a much different story. A man jogging through a neighborhood, hunted down and shot. That footage became a turning point and ultimately led to convictions. In contrast, there's the case of Kyle Rittenhouse. In August 2020, during protests in Kenosha, Wisconsin, protests that erupted after the police shooting of Jacob Blake and were part of the larger wave of demonstrations following the killing of George Floyd, Rittenhouse fatally shot 2 men and injured another. He claimed self-defense, and video footage was central to the trial. That footage showed moments leading up to and during the shootings. It became the foundation of his defense, and ultimately, a jury acquitted him. These cases show how powerful, yet complex, video evidence can be. It can bolster a defense or completely unravel it. In Shanquella's case, the footage already paints a disturbing picture. And now, the court will have to weigh that against the new claims being made in this filing. While we can't predict the outcome, what we can say is this. For the first time in this civil suit, there is now a formal legal strategy on record. And that marks progress. With that, my most astute legal analysis of this so-called self-defense claim is,
Child, please.
still, whether this ends in a settlement or goes all the way to trial, we'll be here to follow every development. Until then, justice for Shanquella.